everybody, and welcome back to Forced Fandom, the show where one person tries to force another to like a thing that they love. I'm here with journalist and lifestyle guru Emily Bamforth, and we are discussing Gilmore Girls again this week. Specifically, an episode from Season 2. I can't remember the episode number, but it's called The Roadtrip to Harvard.
It's episode 4. Also, I want to make the note that Taylor just called me a lifestyle guru because I suggested drinking apple cider mimosas.
It sounds like the most hashtag fall, hashtag autumn, hashtag fabulous thing ever, and so I think you've earned that right.
You know what's great in the fall? Probably a road trip to Harvard. I hear the leaves are lovely.
Can vouch, New England is lovely in the fall.
Hashtag true life fact.
Yes.
New England is alright in the fall. Once again, we have a little bit of an issue because Taylor has to jump through a lot of episodes. And last thing he knew, he was kind of at the tail end of season 1. And now he's a little ways into season 2. Did you feel like you were missing a little bit when you went into this? Such as the entire relationship that kicks off the episode?
Yeah, this episode opens with Lorelai having just called off her wedding with Max. I didn't see any of their relationship whatsoever.
Taylor has no idea that Max even existed.
I feel like I may have known that he existed. I think there were hints at that. But I had no clue that they were, like, engaged or whatever. I don't really feel like I needed to know that going into this episode because they did a pretty good job of recapping the idea that she has broken off her engagement and this is, like, a run-away from her problems road trip. So
let's give you a little context on who Max is that might help you digest. Max was Rory's English teacher at Chilton.
That's sketchy.
Yes, it did not begin well, and Lorelai and he did a little back and forth, because Lorelai was like, nah, I probably shouldn't date my kid's English teacher, and Max, being the nice guy he was like, that's true, but he's also very romantic, so he was like, but romance. And so eventually they ended up dating, and it was very romantic. I personally love Max Medina. I think he's great. He's beautiful, he's smart, he's funny, but throughout the whole thing, you get a little bit of a push and a pull with Max and Lorelai. Lorelai is very strong-willed, and Max tends to he stands up for himself, but he tends to be a little, flimsy. And so eventually they get into a fight, and he proposes to her in the middle of the fight. Because she's like, I don't want you to propose to me in the middle of a fight. I want it to be romantic. I want there to be a 1,000 yellow daisies. And he's like, you're right. And then she walks into the inn and there's 1,000 yellow daisies. And so, you guys can't tell this, but Taylor just made a terrible face.
I mean, that was really predictable even when you were recapping it. So there's that.
That's fair. And so they go through their engagement. Lorelai doesn't initially tell Emily about the engagement, which she gets really, really mad about. She hears about it from Sookie. What else do I need to tell you? Oh, and so before this, Lorelai is at her bachelorette party. I almost had you watch this episode. It was red light on the wedding night. Everybody goes off. Emily comes to the bachelorette party because Michelle invites her. And she tells the story of how nervous she was when she was about to marry Richard and how she knew it was the right thing and all this. And everybody goes off after that story to like call their significant others, and Lorelai doesn't call Max. She calls Christopher, Rory's dad, who you have not met, but is quite...
Yeah, I've met him.
Have you?
Yeah. Briefly.
Anyway. So Christopher and she have a little bit of a back and forth, and she decides eventually she needs to not continue with her wedding, and that's where we get this episode. Is she has run away from her problems a little bit. So let's get into everything. So it starts out and Rory is like, can we please figure out where we're going? In typical Rory fashion.
Meanwhile, Lorelai is way too concerned about the lack of tunage. You can't go on a road trip without tunes.
You need some hot tunes to get you through. While Rory is more like, what is going on? Rory gets a map, and there's this whole bit about her in the map. It's ridiculous.
This whole section, like, all of this in the car, I was like, man, this could be about half as long as it is right now.
They're doing a bit, Taylor.
I know they were doing a bit. The bit just wasn't strong enough to carry the first 10 minutes of the episode, but that's fine.
You're not wrong. So
I did enjoy the fact that neither of them want to listen to Hootie and the Blowfish. Hashtag dated reference.
If it was filmed now, they could listen to Wagon Wheel, the Darius Rucker version. It would be great. So she calls Suki and she's like, have you finished my wedding cake? And Suki's like, no, never. That's not a thing. And then it's beautiful. And I always
And it was a good cake. She probably shouldn't have named it.
Yeah, probably not. Do you still think Suki's a drug dealer?
I don't know. I mean, she named a cake Clyde, and she seemed really worked up about the fact that she wasn't going to be able to serve it to Lorelai. Also, how did she have time to make that giant-ass cake without doing speed? I mean, seriously.
I mean, it's Suki. She is a master chef. If she had a show, it'd be called Master Chef.
There's already a show called Master Chef. Your theory is flawed. I want to go back to the car, and we've finally gotten through the map bit, and now they've decided that they're going to go to a B&B that Lorelai's friend owns. Rory says, a cool B&B? That's like an understated Nicolas Cage movie. That was my favorite line of the episode. My favorite line of the episode is a little bit later, but that was my favorite line in the first half. It was very good.
Good job, Daniel Palladino. That was very clever. And still holds up. That's a good...
Sure does.
Still holds up. And so they're going to Portsmouth in New Hampshire, and they go to the B&B, and the B&B is the worst place on earth.
But I want to ring the bell.
I want to ring the bell. It's named the Cheshire Cat, which, if I was staying at... that just sounds creepy to me. It sounds like...
Yeah, no. I don't ever want to stay there. I just want to go in and ring the bell and then leave.
Do you want to ring the bell? LaDawn. Oh my god.
LaDawn is very well acted, but her whole character is super cringeworthy.
But, like, we've all met a LaDawn, right? Like,
oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, who's just out there.
She just really likes her cats.
Sammy lounging on the staircase. And there are flowers everywhere, and it's great. Except it's actually not. It's absolutely terrible. It's very not Lorelai and Rory's style. They've somehow, like, landed in this very, like, surreal place that is nothing like what they wanted.
Which lends itself to my favorite line in this whole episode, in a scene that kind of feels out of place, but it's there. Lorelai doesn't want to leave the room because all of the Boston lawyers and their wives are down in the living room having a conversation over wine, and so they decide to hole up in the room and not go to dinner and sit there and talk. And so Rory wants to talk about Max, and Lorelai dodges the question and tries to go to bed, and Rory argues with her wanting to talk about it, and finally Lorelai snaps and says, we are not having this fight in a room painted with flowers while a bunch of dentists sing gypsies, tramps, and thieves in the background. It's too David Lynch. Which, really and truly, this whole sequence in the bed and breakfast could have been in Twin Peaks.
You're completely right, actually.
Like, the whole time I was watching this, I was like, LaDawn could just be a character in Twin Peaks.
What's funny is that I've always said that this episode makes me extremely uncomfortable for many, many reasons. And now I know why. It's got the Twin Peaks factor in it, where it's hilarious, but very uncomfortable. That's so funny. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, there are a couple of, like, weird little Twin Peaks references in this episode. But we'll get to that later.
I think that's so funny. Lorelai is a Twin Peaks fan.
It all comes full circle.
It all comes full circle. Shameless plug.
Go back and listen to the first season of Force Fandom where we talked about Twin Peaks.
How many times can we plug that series in this series?
Ad nauseum.
The limit does not exist. They have this fight, and it's kind of a push and a pull here because Lorelai has taken Rory and kind of gone off on this wild adventure, and Rory has very much not questioned the reasoning behind it because Rory kind of understands. But then they have this very, like, I think it's more I think it's a little bit more mature, even though it isn't mature. You know what I mean? Like,
It's more
Rory,
mature than other fights that they've had.
well, it's Rory, like, saying, hey, you can't just do whatever you want, and I accept that as, like, the status quo. And, like, Lorelai is a model for Rory in her relationships, and Rory's at the point where she actually, like, is like, oh, I'm in a pretty, like, stable relationship. I think that I could ask this question. It's also the first time that Lorelai has really been in a serious relationship around Rory. And there's a whole bit about that.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, it's definitely an interesting argument to have. It just felt kind of like the first section of this episode was so much just them doing a bit that when all of a sudden it gets serious and then it stops being serious after the commercial break, I'm like, really? Did we need to go there? Like, couldn't
I
it
think
just...
we did need to go there, though, is the thing. Like, having this is something that's very relatable to me. And I think it's because, like, when you're avoiding a topic for so long and then eventually you just, like, somebody tries to slip it in and it just blows up in, like, a gigantic thing. Like, you're almost overcompensating in a way to make up for the fact that you're not having this conversation.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, like, it's just, like, something that I very much understand why they did it that way. The shift in tone is kind of weird. I completely understand, but especially in a room full of flowers, it does seem very, very surreal. And then you hear Lorelai admitting that she didn't really love Max.
Yeah, you do get that closure at the end of the scene, which I think was really important.
And yeah, it was actually, it was quite interesting when you know Max, because Max is kind of perfect and he's kind of put in there as like, oh, he understands that Lorelai is flawed and like appreciates her quirks. But at the end of the day, even though he's like very good for her, she doesn't actually love him. And I think that's a very interesting reason that she has for ending that relationship. And I think it says a lot about Lorelai as a person. It's very hard for you to comment on this when you
it's like
the entire
I missed
Max
the whole relationship, and so I'm only seeing the aftermath. And I guess maybe that's part of the reason why the shift in tone felt weird. But I think it was well played and it was well written. It took me off guard, is all.
Right. You should go back and watch. Well, if you become a fan, you should go back and watch the Max relationship because it's good. It's very good.
So then the next morning, more importantly,
Yes.
they have scones and, you know...
More importantly, they have scones.
Not more importantly. I was going to skip over this whole scene by just saying they have scones and quirky banter with the people who are also staying in the B&B. And...
What about the guest book, Taylor?
Oh, yeah, they write about Satan in the guest book. That was a little strange.
It's so funny.
Yeah, okay, whatever.
It's funny because they're messing with the weird, like, perky people.
Yeah, this is true. They do that a lot.
Taylor's, like, not amused.
But then they go to Harvard, and that was amusing.
Yeah, so they're going to Harvard, and I don't know if you heard, but Rory really, really, really wants to go to Harvard.
If you didn't know that based on, like, the 10 times in the 2 episodes I've already watched that she wants to go to Harvard, by now, they're, like, beating you over the head with it. Like, she's so impressed and intimidated by it that she doesn't even want to walk under the archway onto campus. And I was like, wow, this is adorable, but also, let's pick up the pace a little bit, let's move along. There were a few scenes in this section where they're at Harvard that kind of felt that way, but on the whole, I thought this was a really interesting and fun little look at Rory's future. As well as an opportunity for more really fun banter.
That's true, but before we get into that fun banter, let's return to Stars Hollow for a second.
Oh yeah, because we have to call Suki.
Yeah, because Lorelai just keeps checking in for no apparent reason. And the spreading of the news is going well, except Luke doesn't know yet. And as you know, Luke gives Lorelai very, very flirty glances over large cups of coffee.
Yes, and so he is very excited when he hears that the wedding is off and gives everyone in the cafe free coffee. Because, he's just so smitten.
Let's insert a trope about how the grumpy guy is happy because his unrequited love's relationship ended.
This week on Trope Watch.
Hashtag Trope Watch. Hashtag Trope Watch 2K16.
Yes.
All right, we can go to Harvard now.
So,
And
yeah, we're at Harvard, and John Adams is very in right now.
very in.
And there are really big libraries, and Lorelai has always wanted to use existentialist in a sentence.
Don't we all?
Right? And Rory doesn't really need to read Tuesdays with Morrie. She can just kind of skip that one. These are all pieces of standout banter from this section, in case you were wondering.
Taylor's just running through the highlights. My favorite parts probably is, besides Rory just being pretentious for like a very, very long time. I haven't read all the books. I need to read all the books. I think one of my favorite bits is when someone, like one of the guys on campus, hits on Lorelai and is like, I think we're in class together.
Yeah, that part was really funny. There are moments in this show that are just too real. That was one of them.
I think we're in the same class. Oh, well, really? So they go into a dorm and they hang out in there and they take a photo at the desk.
That was awkward.
This is real awkward. And then Rory goes into a classroom and just, kills the game.
Yeah, she's in there slaying.
Which is, an endorsement to Chilton as an educational institute. That is for damn sure.
Well, I mean, she probably knew all this stuff before she even got to Chilton because she just reads so many books.
All of the books. You
all
learn all of the things
learn
from
all
reading
the
fiction
things.
books.
Yeah, but while she's in there just completely tromping all over the Harvard students, kind of, sort of, but not really, Lorelai is out in the hallway on the phone again and then looking at pictures on the wall. And this part confuses me. So she's looking at the pictures of all the Harvard valedictorians, and she gets down to one of the more recent ones, which is Erica Hilson Palmer. You mentioned last time that Erica is a character that I need to pay attention to. Is this like the introduction moment for her?
Erica? I mentioned no Erica.
Did you not?
No. Erica's not important. You never see her again.
Oh, so what you're saying then is that this is just some kind of elaborate Twin Peaks reference in the middle of this Gilmore Girls episode? I never.
But what's important about Erica Palmer? Tell me. What's significant? Did you get the significance of her staring at her? Taylor is staring at me and looks like the shocked emoji. All right.
No, so the significance to me was that she was a young woman with the last name Palmer against the background of some red drapes.
No.
I was in full Twin Peaks conspiracy mode at this point, so.
This is not a Twin Peaks. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe Daniel Palladino is a huge David Lynch fan, but really, the thing is that she's looking at the class where she would have graduated and thinking about the fact that if she didn't have Rory, or not even didn't have Rory, had taken the path that her parents had chosen for her, she could have been on that wall. Because she too was smart. She too is smart. And so she's looking at the wall and she's thinking, maybe that could have been me.
I didn't catch that at all.
It's like a very heart-wrenching moment because you don't, and I think I've mentioned this before, you don't see Lorelai question her choices very much. Or at least regret her choices. And this is just like this very bittersweet moment where you could have seen that, like, because Lorelai is incredibly intelligent and you could have seen her going to Harvard. She had the money, she had the schooling. And so she's kind of looking at a life that she potentially could have had. That's
a moving sequence, I guess. I didn't really pay attention to the years on the photos, and so that's probably why I missed it. That's really interesting.
Palmer. That's now I know if there's any scene with a Palmer in it, we're just gonna lose you entirely.
I mean, basically, I'm just gonna go down the rabbit hole and like start thinking about, what this all means.
Quickly, post a screenshot on the Twin Peaks Reddit group. Go, quickly.
But for real though, delete it up. Yeah, I thought the ending of this episode, like, the beginning of this episode felt really drawn out and like a really long bit. The middle section at Harvard was good. And then everything from this scene in front of the photo onwards feels like it drags. Because this is the part where they go back to Stars Hollow, and they do the photo slideshow for Grandma, and Lorelai's really bad at taking pictures, which is kind of amusing. Rory meets up with her friend, and Lorelai goes into the coffee shop and meets up with Luke. And I was just like, oh, man,
But
this
you're
is a lot of
skimming
exposition.
over so much. There's a lot of action here. It's a lot of subtle action, but it's a lot of action.
It just felt like a lot of exposition to me. Please enlighten me. Please explain what happened.
I shall enlighten you. For you enlightened me when I was like, Twin Peaks is boring. I don't need sawmill politics. So one of the things to note in the scene with the slideshow, which I'm sure you did note, but I'm not sure if you paid too much attention to it. Emily freaks out, basically.
Oh, yeah, you're right. This was important. Emily freaks out because she thinks that something's going on with the wedding, that Lorelai doesn't want her to go, and then Lorelai explains that she canceled the wedding, and then she gets even more upset and is like, why didn't you, did he cancel this, and why did you cancel this, and well, I guess I'm going to have to return your gift. And then the tables reverse, and Lorelai is upset that she doesn't know what the gift is, and so they're going back and forth about the gift. And all this time, Rory's just sitting on the couch reading Virginia Woolf because she's too bookish to care.
And you're still missing it!
This just felt like so much exposition.
Oh my god, Taylor, you're missing it! Okay, let's go back. Let's slow down. Emily thinks... Emily does not know the wedding is off, right?
Right.
Emily then thinks that Max and Lorelai have eloped because they say that the wedding is off. So she's like, oh my god, how could you do this? And then she goes, oh, me and Max are not together anymore. And Emily immediately, it doesn't seem like she asked too many questions. She doesn't get mad at Lorelai for canceling the wedding, if you notice. It's not like oh, you're so irresponsible for canceling this wedding. And then she goes, well, I'll just have to return your gift. And her mother... I feel
like I conveyed that pretty well.
But no, it's this thing that, like, Emily, by all rights, should have freaked out and said, you can't, like, keep a relationship together. Why are you so flaky? What are you doing? But at the end, she just accepted it. She accepted it, and in, like, very Emily fashion was like, well, I'll just have to return the gift. And then Lorelai bugs her about what the gift was because she wants to know, and it becomes this more light-hearted conversation. But, like, Lorelai was so afraid to tell her mother. And at the end of the day, Emily just changes the conversation and doesn't, drag on with it, which is something that Lorelai thought she would do. It's like a very notable moment with Emily and Lorelai, because Lorelai has all these expectations of how Emily will react to things, and Emily subverts those expectations at the times where Lorelai really kind of needs support.
Okay. You're right. When you're right, you're right.
I am right. It's not fun when you say I'm right.
I mean, I read this scene as just, like, exposition. Because I felt I was not at all surprised that Emily had no issue with the wedding being called off. Like, she expected it to be called off, in a way.
See, I didn't get that at all. We read that scene entirely differently.
Yeah, because my vibe for that whole scene was like, she just assumed that it was too good to be true the whole time.
Okay. Well,
because Lorelai is so good at throwing her life away, air quotes.
We got a completely different interpretation.
Either way, I think you're right. It does say something. It says basically the same thing about Emily's character of, like, she is interested in Lorelai's life, but not in the way that Lorelai wants her to be interested in it. I
disagree. I think it shows that Emily can be, like, their relationship is maturing in a way, and Lorelai may have put expectations on her mother or have leftover memories that are guiding her interactions with her mother that might not be true. Look at this. Art is in the interpretation. Anyway, now that we're done with that, the whole Lane thing is pretty shallow. Nobody really cares about Lane going to Korea.
She escaped.
Everybody thought that Lane might not come back from Korea. That's what the problem was, because her parents bought her a one-way ticket.
So basically they were trying to, like, write her out of the show, and then they brought her back?
More so that they were afraid that, I can't remember what prompts them to send her to Korea. Oh, the relationship she has, but doesn't tell her parents. she has this relationship with this guy. It's not really that big of a deal. Okay, so Lorelai and Luke, he made her a huppa, a beautiful, beautiful huppa.
Yeah. This was like another one of those things that would probably be a little more significant had I spent more time with these characters. But it just kind of felt like this awkward thing of he's really into her but doesn't know how to say it, and she has no idea. He's just the guy that gives her coffee. And so, you know, there's like a half a second of a will they, won't they, and then he's like, yeah, I'll just come over and take care of that thing whenever. I think that
if you had more context for it, you might be able to, like, get more out of the scene, but
I know where it's ultimately going, right? Like...
Yeah, you know where it's ultimately going. But when? Let's talk about the fact that this road trip, along with being a visit to Harvard and a escape from Lorelai's problems and a little bit towards Rory's future, it was also a step towards Lorelai's future. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's this interesting moment where Luke asks Lorelai if she's ready to see Rory as a college student, and she says no. And I think that, like, that conversation is one of, like, the most impactful in the episode, and it's really strange that conversation is with Luke and not with Emily or Suki, who have both talked about college more in the episode than he has. Like, this would have seemed like a really great, like, long scene at Emily's house, where she could have said this to Lorelai about Rory.
That's true, but that's not the type of conversations that Emily and Lorelai have.
Well, they had a similar conversation about Chilton in the pilot.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like, and maybe this is coming from someone who's watched a lot of Luke and Lorelai, but it's a very, like, comfortable and a very intimate conversation for these two people who... At their base are the guy who gives her coffee and this woman who lives in a town. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, for two people that are friends, this is a very intimate conversation. And then Lorelai talks more about her future and opening the inn with Suki.
Yes. And that's exciting. I'm excited for them to get their business off the ground and to have this kind of, like, shake up in Lorelai's professional life. Because... a lot of the sequences at the inn in the previous episodes have been kind of boring, and so I think it'll be more exciting with the two of them running the show.
And yeah, it's a very good thing for her. It's a very good thing for Suki, and you kind of think, hey, this trip about Rory's future has kind of got her thinking of her own, which is good.
Yeah.
So
all in all, I mean, this isn't my favorite episode that we've watched, but I think you were right in showing it to me because it's an important, like, transitional episode for all of the characters.
Yeah, I think that, like, and I referenced this earlier, it's an episode that makes me very uncomfortable. Just the way it's paced is a little weird, and, like, the bonds of, like, the banter isn't as comfortable as it normally is. And it's a huge conflict. Like, this is a life transformative conflict, and they're kind of running away from it and not talking about it. But I do think it's a very transformative episode. I also think that it's a very mature episode for what the show has been.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
What do you think of Lorelai now? I know you weren't her biggest fan before, and this is a big episode for her.
I'm starting to warm up to her, but then I'm also, like, frustrated with her at the same time. Because it kind of feels like Lorelai as a character is only allowed to progress at the pace the script allows.
That is because I that sentence was weird.
So let me.
Characters can only progress at the rate the script allows. That's the point.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it feels very much like Rory did this big progressive thing, and so now we have to write in a progression for Lorelai. Like, it feels very, like, in fits and starts, based on what I've seen so far, as opposed to Rory, who kind of has this, like, organic flow of progression because she's growing older. Everything is a new experience for her. It feels like for Lorelai, you kind of have to force it a little bit more, because she doesn't have, like, the changing of the school years and all of these, like, artificial things that you can build in, you know?
But doesn't that reflect real-life adulthood?
No, I think it does. I think it absolutely does. I think that might just be why I don't relate to her character as well. This is the first one where I felt just about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it didn't really grip me.
That's fair. I think that, like, the other episodes are so vibrant that when you get to this one that is, you're right, it's mainly exposition for other things. Once you get to that, it's very weird because you're like, oh yeah, this is not the way that this show is normally paced at all. But that's not going to be the case for the next episode because we already have the next episode that Taylor's going to watch.
Wow, shocker. What are we watching next?
The next episode is The Bracebridge Dinner.
Okay.
In which there is a really, really funny dinner with lots of cool costumes. You get to meet Suki's significant other. And you get to meet Jess.
Ah, that's the character you mentioned last time. Jess. Okay.
Jess, yes. The second of Rory's three main... He is a major point of contention in the Gilmore Girls fandom, and I'm excited for you to meet him. I think you're going to have some hot takes.
Excited to discuss my takes with you and with the people. And if anybody else wants to discuss my hot takes or not so hot takes, you can do that on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @TCOlmstead, or you can like the show on Facebook, and we can do that in the comments over there as well.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to critique the fact that I'm making Taylor skip entire relationships and then comment on them, or talk to me about numerous other things, including my favorite Rory Gilmore boyfriend, or, I don't know, Northeast Ohio news. It's fall in Northeast Ohio now. We can discuss that.
#basic.
You can find me on Twitter @EmilyMBamforth.
Well, I'm disappointed that I didn't get to ring the bell, but I'm glad we watched this episode.
And you get to give your hot takes on Dreamy Boys next episode.
I can't wait.